Welcome to In Front of Ira.
We're Sabrina.
And Torsten.
Two historians.
And friends.
And lovers.
Of romantic comedies.
This is the podcast in which we answer the age-old question.
Will they or won't they?
Is it or isn't it a romantic comedy? And we still don't have anything.
We still don't know what the next part is. Technically, that is two questions. Please just say the next line so we can get over this.
Anyway, this episode is about what happens later.
Yeah, which
is a very, very recent movie from late 2023. German release was only just this month.
Only just now, yeah.
May 2024. And it is directed by Meg Ryan. It is also co-written by Meg Ryan. It is placed, yeah. It's based on a play by Stephen Dietz called Shooting Star. Yeah, there's a third guy, Kirkland, who also rewrote the play for.
And it feels like a play. It really feels like a play. So, what is this movie about?
This movie is about Meg Ryan and David Duchovny playing two people who used to date in their 20s. They're now way into their 50s. In reality, they're in their 60s, at least David Duchovny is. And they meet again at an airport while changing planes. But the airport is hit by a snowstorm, so they end up getting stuck in this airport and spend the night there sort of in the limbo of airportness, and end up talking about their past relationship and where they are right now in their lives. And it feels very much like a play. It's like sort of the Kammerspiel kind of thing. It is the bottle episode feeling. And it was also filmed at a regional airport in Arkansas after hours. So they've had to film all night in this small regional airport.
It's a great set. Like, it's a good airport to be filming, and it's visually very interesting.
Yeah.
The thing that struck me about this movie immediately is, I'm just going to cry. I missed Meg Ryan, like, so much. Like, just the fact that she shows up and delivers her lines, like these long dialogue lines, which are so reminiscent of her Nora Ephron deliveries. I mean, this is dedicated to Nora Ephron as well, in When Harry Met Sally and in You've Got Mail and in Sleepless in Seattle. It's just like my heart, grew to 3 sizes. It was like, oh, I've been missing this. She just has a way of saying words in a way that you understand where she's coming from and that you understand why you actually like this character. There is something very, at this point, obviously kind of nostalgic about it, but it's just so good. I just liked it so much.
I also miss David Duchovny, and I do actually think that also matters, because sort of where they are, because this is now 2024, and it's probably this moment, sort of like when they dated, it was the 90s, sort of early 90s, and I mean, this is also when David Duchovny became famous with the X-Files, and when Meg Ryan was doing movies with Nora Ephron, and I think it's sort of very intentionally also, like, it is there. It's partially nostalgia for when they were young and sort of what they lost, but also like sort of the regrets over like what, and I think that it actually makes David Duchovny like a perfect casting choice for people who sort of grew up in the 90s with all of that.
I mean,
unless he always he's also great, but like I think.
And also, I mean, like, unless you cast Gillian Anderson in the Meg Ryan role, there's absolutely not a better pairing that you could have used here. He's really good in this. He's also really good at the dialogue delivery, which is a thing that I wondered about this, because they were both ironically huge stars in the 90s in different media, right? Because film and television, much more of a separation. And man, I would have loved to see a David Duchovny Meg Ryan romantic comedy in like 97 or something.
Yeah, or
that would have been
generally have him
great.
do romantic comedy
Yeah.
or whatever. He sort of missed that moment, I guess, because he was on television, and you weren't doing big movies when you were on television in the 90s. But I
He
think
did some weird indie movies, which were always interesting, but yeah.
Yeah, and then he continued in television. He did Californication for a really long time. I mean, with a bit of a gap to the X-Files. Has done some other stuff since. I mean, he's also, I think, what comes into the role really well is like, I mean, he has a band now. He's been writing songs. He's been he's an author. He's a published fiction author.
Yeah.
And poet, I think, as well, which is sort of what seeps into the character who at least used.
I mean, he's in all but dissertation English major at some point as well. He almost went that route. And for the benefit of all of us, chose not to go there.
Isn't there a quote that I encountered again recently on one of my like social media timelines, where he was someone's mother's TA in college?
Oh, like, yeah. Vaguely remember this.
Refused to watch the X-Files because, and I need to look this quote up now,
because he was like. He was like a...
Wait. I need to find this.
I remember this, yes.
Do I find this immediately? Yeah, I found the tweet. Hang on. It's floating. Because it's so funny. My mom refuses to watch the X-Files because David Duchovny was her TA for a class, and he apparently lounged about in a whorish manner. It's just like, yes, okay. This is actually a tweet from last year, December 2023, so maybe it also came up because the movie
came out, yeah.
But yes, this anecdote is now... It's now a thing.
That's pretty funny.
Retweet while I'm there. But it is, yeah.
But he has that sensibility because in the X-Files, there were so many episodes. He did definitely play that, romantic energy with Gillian Anderson, which gave energy to so many ships. And he also has that twinkle in his eyes, comedic delivery, which he absolutely did get to do on the X-Files because they have these weird episodes.
Later on, I think season 6 of the X-Files remains my favorite because they did random nonsense like
they did like back-to-back random nonsense
in season 6.
Wow.
And like there's like I remember Dreamland, where you sort of said a lot of like the goofing off physical comedy stuff, and I was reminded of that a bit. Like one of my favorite scenes in this movie is there's a scene where they dance. It's like sort of in the middle of the night, and like they just dance. And I think that like what is important to point out about this movie is like it has that element of like magical realism immediately.
Yeah.
The only other character in this movie is actually the airport voice, and it's not just like making announcements about their flights being delayed and canceled and where they have to go, but it like actively guides them around the airport and around the other, and obviously is trapping them in the airport to like work through their past together. Like it's not letting them go. The airport is not letting them leave until they worked out their issues.
Yeah, it could be a much darker movie. But it's really good. The magical realism, I think, really works. It's something I kind of struggled with in the beginning because when the airport voice first comes in, it just sounds like normal announcements, and then it kind of goes off into like specifically talking to them. Feels a little bit weird at the beginning. But what this movie kind of reminded me of is two things. One of them is I think it's a Danish Christmas series which is set at an airport during, I think, a snowstorm. And there's all these different, it feels like one of those like things where all the stories are somehow related, come together, like I think, better version of Valentine's Day. And that certainly had that energy of people just kind of being put together in combinations that they usually wouldn't be. And it has that kind of before sunrise energy of just kind of people in transportation spaces just talking, and kind of like almost like an Eric Romer movie just talking, which I just love. Like, I know it's the least visually interesting thing typically. I mean, again, this airport is really well. It lends itself to yeah. But I love just people talking in movies. It's a thing that supposedly you're not supposed to do, but it's such a hugely important element in romantic comedies, and it is
it's just
so important here.
Movie, and like, I mean, they immediately also set up the magical realism, which is like, oh, it's Leap Day, sort of like magical.
Yeah, it's a February 29th.
Like a borrowed day, like it's
not real. Yeah.
And I mean, we sort of like slowly uncover this past relationship they had because of these conversations and getting back into like their old fights. And they're sort of established that she's like the sort of out there hippie, like used to be, still kind of is. Turns out she also kind of sold out because she noticed like what customer data or something or other.
Yeah.
But like she carries a rain stick with her. She first says she's visiting this old friend in Boston. Turns out she's actually visiting her daughter, that she gave up for adoption.
Yeah.
Which is part of sort of the backstory that is uncovered there. So like at first you get the idea they broke up. I mean, they broke up when they were young. They were in their mid-20s, and probably just didn't fit very well. There's a whole thing of she wanted to open up the relationship, and he agreed, but like always struggled with it, and that sort of broke them apart. And like the idea that she'd never like fit that version of life where they would have gotten married and had a kid, but it also turns out they lost a kid because she got pregnant, probably unplanned, but like we're still happy that they were pregnant and that she had a miscarriage, and that is clearly what broke them up. Like that is like, yes, the circumstance of who they are is people, but like clearly this like sort of
I mean, if this happens to you in like your 20s and you don't know who you are and you don't know where life is going, it feels it's strange as a movie, because on the one hand it just feels tragic in the sense that like a Eugene O'Neill play feels tragic when you figure out all because it is kind of like a Long Day's Journey into Night kind of setup where more and more things are uncovered. There's fewer characters, but the kind of general idea is similar, and it feels tragic, right? You hear this tragic miscarriage, and then the fact that she says at some point, it never struck me that you wanted like this normal life with a wife and kids, and now you have that, just not with me, which is really, really kind of one of those like the one that got away kind of moments, which I think especially for people like in at their age in their 50s, 60s, kind of looking back at her life, which for both of them hasn't worked out exactly the way that they thought, right? He's divorced, which comes out relatively late in the movie, which is why for a long time you kind of like see them getting closer, but there's like this invisible barrier still between them until this comes out, and then they do actually kind of like
his daughter is like how old now? 16 and there's also, again, there's not just a mischance of that relationship, but also like sort of that aspect of like selling out and like going sort of the safe route in life of like picking a job that actually pays instead of pursuing the arts. Like he used to write poetry, he used to write songs, and then doesn't do that, but has whatever corporate job he has right now that he's also flying around for, and missing his daughter's dance recital. And he also tried to talk some sense into his daughter because she said she wants to be a dancer, like as a career, and he was like, yeah, but like that's that's gonna break your heart, that's not gonna work, you're not gonna make money,
and it's gonna break your body, and then you wash out at like 30.
And then Meg Ryan was like, yeah, but maybe she could teach children to dance and she would really love it. And it's suddenly like, yeah, there are actually people who are dancers who don't become like professional ballet dancers or whatever, and then had that sort of professional athlete trajectory. There's other ways to keep doing this.
I mean, you could become like a TikToker. That's just what they do.
Yeah, but like exactly that thing of like there are actually sort of like less lofty goals hidden in there too, and it's still something she could be doing with her life. Which feels like sort of the common sense solution that neither of them seems to have taken for themselves either. Like they sort of went the other way, which then obviously by sort of he ends up getting his daughter on the phone and sort of was like, yeah, you know, you could try this. It's fine. You can try this. But they sort of like work through this whole thing in like the span of hours of like the airport trapping them.
It's really well done, and I think probably a lot of this is already in the play, the way that this is set up, but it's certainly their chemistry that makes this work for us as people who are fans clearly of both of these actors and have been since basically they were first introduced to us in their early works. And the thing that really struck me about this movie is how it just kind of naturally transitions from this kind of almost verisimilitude in the beginning, where we don't have the magical realism, and it just kind of slowly transitions into it. There's not really a rhyme or reason, except it's Leap Day, and there's a storm, and we get like these CGI shots of snow coming down in the airport, and then the kind of like comments by the airport voice, where they talk about like a bomb cyclone is coming down in the airport, and they're both like, bomb cyclone, is that a thing? And then the airport voice goes like, yes, that is a thing. Which but that seeps in, and I really just love the way that you don't know from the beginning that you're going to be taken into this magical realist world, and you just kind of slide into it. I really like the way that they did that. And
then people also go away for a while. Like just the other
everyone else just goes away.
Like there's some extras. So again, nobody else has actually any speaking lines, except for this airport voice. But they also disappear. I mean, you get the sense it's now middle of the night, and other people, like, there's a dimension of like the hotel voucher that they try to get, and he tries to get some in the front, doesn't work. And they do get drunk at a bar, so there must have been a bartender and so on and so forth. But like
we see them after the bartender left. Yeah.
And they stop interacting with people, and then they suddenly have the whole terminal to themselves and like sit in this little complimentary shuttle that is a shuttle that compliments you.
I love that line. It is just again, since we're already we're laughing already. It is romantic. It is funny. It is really funny, and most of that fun comes from their delivery and the lines, and there's very little. I mean, there is some physical comedy in this, but most of it is really just down to the dialogue.
Yeah, and when they fight, it was like, oh, not everything has gotten worse. Some things have gotten better. And like one of the things they disagree on if it's made things better or worse is the internet. Which, you know, it's very true. The internet has things made so much better, but like it also has made everything so much worse. And one of my other favorite lines of dialogue is like, I always liked your mom. Somebody had to. which is a very sort of like when Harry met Sally kind of dialogue.
It is generally, I think it's not wrong for the dedication to Nora Ephron, because of the people involved, mostly Meg Ryan, but also it is in the spirit of Nora Ephron, the dialogue. It is very much like the closest, I think, that a romantic comedy, for me at least, has come in kind of like the sparkling of the dialogue since When Harry Met Sally, which might be, I've seen this very recently, so it might just be at the top of my mind, and maybe I'll change my mind about that if I see the next movie. But it really, really taps into this. And again, like, one of the first things I realized about this movie is how much I missed Meg Ryan saying lines like this. And it is magical. I mean, the words are magical.
I've been in my 50s since my 20s. And him sort of being too anxious to try things. It was like, this is you. It's like,
that is why you thought, because like you texted me at some point, like, I'm watching this movie and David Duchovny is you. And I'm like, is he though? Like, because he's also very talented and handsome, but like, I don't think that's what you meant.
No, I meant he's a bit neurotic. He's too anxious to try certain things, and that's kind of like defined a lot of his life, seemingly. And then also like he's been in his 50s since he was in his 20s, which sort of makes sense.
People used to call me an old soul when I was 18, and I think that always just means
you're on the spectrum. But like
fair, but yeah.
But yeah, like sort of
it's just great explanation right there.
But anyway, yeah, no, I think that is sort of the vibe, which
I mean, it's about regrets.
Yeah.
It's about regrets, but it's not like, this is the thing that I was talking about earlier. It is about, it's a movie about regrets, and it could be so heavy and so, oh my God, these people, like, they frittered away their lives not being together, and they're clearly still meant to be together because their lives have not worked out the way that they wanted without the other one. And it's not, it's hopeful, it's funny, it feels like a very adult way, which is probably a weird thing to say, about a very self-conscious, intellectual way of approaching the passage of time.
It is people in their 60s who probably necessarily wouldn't go back and change everything, because it would also mean undoing things like he has a daughter that he loves very much. Right? That, like, it is sort of like making peace with things that I think is a process that starts in your 30s ideally, and like sort of takes time for you to arrive there. And they clearly have, and that doesn't mean you won't always look back and regret things, but it is just a perspective you rarely have in romantic comedies, because most of them are about younger people. And I mean, Nancy Meyers has done so many as like about older people who sort of, there is a perspective of that in there. But this, like, very much, I think, foregrounds that. And again, that's also why it works, that it's actors that we've known since the 90s, who we've known at a younger point in time. And she also says, like, I was 20, and he was like, you were 25. And she was like, exactly. It's like, what did I know?
Yeah.
It doesn't make that much difference. And again, even like once you pass 30, you realize, no, it doesn't. Like, you're not a fully fledged adult. And it's like he's sort of going through this, and then again, even more, like, it would have been probably too early to try to settle down, have kids, even though a lot of people do that in their 20s, especially in that generation.
Yeah, and then have other regrets, right? That's always, yeah. It's I really like because it's, again, the perspective, right? It's about perspective. It's about them being older, and the fact that there aren't many romantic comedies that have people like that in them. Like, a lot of these romantic comedies are about people in their 20s and 30s. That's kind of standard, right? Every standard romantic comedy
because that's when you find the one, and then you settle down.
Which is also
the next 30,
years.
But realistically, 50% of you will get divorced within the next 10. So it's like,
yeah, it's the temporality of heteronormativity that is very much bearing down on even the best of the genre, because it's Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally and Carrie Fisher discussing when the biological clock starts ticking, and like what that's supposed to mean, and the way it's treated in the comedy is kind of as a joke, but also that is what this is kind of about. This is what all of them are kind of about. There are times in your life when you're supposed to have done certain things.
And I think that is also sort of the Nora Ephron perspective in certain ways, because at least like some of the writing, also Nora Ephron is kind of side of movie scripts, is like, I mean, she was married, 3 times? Like, she very much knew this, and like heartburn and all of that, and then being still pregnant or having young kids when you get divorced too, and it's like, it's messy, and it's never actually really over either, which is both good and bad. It's like, I think she actually knew this, right? And then maybe sometimes wrote more escapist texts, but I mean, even in Sleepless in Seattle, he's a widower, so there's always been sort of a perspective of like there were other things. And When Harry Met Sally, they both have just gotten out of like long-term relationships. He's getting divorced and doing things in front of Ira.
In front of Ira.
But like, it's always in there. But like, obviously, they're still younger at the time. And then the thing is, you can be in your 60s, and now he's getting divorced now, and he has had this other relationship before even his marriage, and things just continue. I think also even the almost bigger tragedy than that miscarriage in their 20s is obviously that then right after he left, she had a child with someone else who didn't want the child and ends up deciding to give the child up for adoption, which seems like it feels like the bigger regret because it is an outcome out of what happened before, I think. Maybe like it feels like that those two things are clearly related. They're also related in the dialogue and how she tells that story of like she probably not at any other point in time would have given a child up for adoption if it had not come out of losing a child with the person she actually wanted to have it with, and not this other guy who was probably a fling and then
disappeared.
And and now her adult child who's 20 years old got in touch and wants to meet her, and she's very afraid of again confronting that moment in the past she probably does regret, even though she says she's grateful she found like the right parents for her, but it's clearly there, like it's clearly haunted her.
The thing that I really liked about this is because we typically, when we get the perspective of the adoptee, right, of the kid looking for their parents and finding them or not finding them and what that means emotionally to them, and of course that's a hugely important moment in their life, but the other side, which is the person who gave the kid up, coming to terms with that and coming to meet that kid decades later, is not so much, I think, discussed in popular culture, and we have that here
because we shame women for doing that, right? And they shame themselves and they regret it, or might not even regret it. Like there's good reasons why people do this, but it's also often people who give up a child early on and then have other kids later and then hide that shame sort of like doing that. And it's like, I know there's a lot of people who are very against adoption as a concept. I'm neither here nor there because I've not had that experience from either angle. I cannot speak to this, but it is a whole thing, and it's like I'm just thinking about the actor Brenton Hunt, who's also the writer producer and last, like he did an episode of Brett Goldstein's podcast where he talks about the fact that his mother, who he's had a very complicated relationship with, apparently gave up a child when she was very young, because she was like young Irish American working class, like single mother, and then had him, and I mean then other siblings, several other siblings, and then he didn't know he had the sister until his mother apparently already passed, and the sister found him and his siblings through like some Ancestry.com or like, you know, some kind of...
That is really, that's a thing that's come in. And like, I remember sitting at some family function, and it was, I think my brother had recently done the 23andMe, and like I've done this for like a very, like I've done this I think years ago, and it was very clear that I am the child of my parents because they also did it. So like it wasn't, but I think he discovered that there is somebody completely in a completely different place who is related to our family much closer than they should be, that we don't know about them, like grandparents, like brother level. I'm like, wait, how, like, and you kind of wonder, well, like, how did that happen, right?
Yeah, and like even I have relatives in the States who I'm like sort of second cousin, third cousin. They're my mom's age, and then obviously I have cousins that's sort of my age because she has several children. But like I know her best, and then she also told me when I met up with her like last year, it's like, oh, they found, because during the pandemic, this all like a lot of people were stuck at home doing Ancestry.com shit apparently, and she found someone who clearly, like her not mother, like her aunt or something, had an extramarital affair with someone, but the child is mixed race, and like that clearly was that made it very clear that there's a different father or something, and she like denied it until her death.
The interesting thing about this, and I've been wondering about this, because in the 19th century, this stuff was incredibly common. Like when we have, like, you know, the Dickensian orphans, they're not all orphans because their parents are dead. Most of the orphans in the 19th century are just kids that were abandoned by their parents because they didn't have the means or they didn't have the wherewithal to actually deal with these kids.
Yeah, and you didn't have abortion and you didn't have any other ways.
And so
we're just having kids.
So I think we haven't really, as a society, really started talking about that this kind of stuff is very prevalent even today, even when abortion is readily, I mean, I'm saying this like from a position of a place where it is, right? That's also something that's clearly under attack. And I think these two things are related, because in the end, they're about women at a certain stage in their life making decisions for what the rest of their life will look like and what the societal expectations are. And the way that both of these things are not really talked about, I think, in quote unquote polite society, that they're not at the forefront of many discussions about issues that actually concern this, is related, right? These two things are very much related. And the fact that it's brought up here is really interesting, and the way that it is brought up here is very interesting. And I don't have anything specific or smart to say about that, except that it's very interesting and that it's not something I usually see in media. And so I was kind of grateful to see it here.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, like, again, it's like there's probably, as I said, some shame there, or because there always is, but like it's not like reflected back on us. Like, as I don't think as an audience member, I'm supposed to sit there and judge her. If you do, I'm sorry, I don't care about you. Like, I don't in this moment, at least. And he doesn't either, right? I think he's sad for her, but he's also hopeful for her and is trying to encourage her to, because she's like sort of struggling with this, and now she's stuck in this airport, and there's a moment where she's like, I don't even want to take my flight anymore. I just want to go home. And he pushes her to try this and like see and meet her adult child, and maybe there's still a relationship they will have in the future. Like, obviously the kid has other parents, it's totally fine, but like she can still have her relationship with her birth mother, and clearly at least trying to have that. And so it is a like interesting thing. And he has this daughter who he loves very much and is trying to do right by her, and like trying to not make her like make her take risk. And I think that's like sort of obviously it's the extension of, again, like the risks he didn't take, and he's trying to protect her, but like we also get the sense that he never took any risk because he was too afraid, and now he has regrets, and it's like, just let her try. It's like the thing, they're both just learning that you can try things even if you're in your 60s or 50s, and try new things. And I think there's the bittersweet ending of the film where they part ways, and they part ways on good terms, and they kiss again, and they get on the plane. But then there's the moment where they're sort of, again, a bit of a mythical realism, like the planes are next to each other and they can see each other out of the plane windows, and he's trying to telegraph his phone number to her because apparently they didn't exchange those, and then the planes part in separate ways. And again, it is now 2024. The internet both could have.
Yeah, it doesn't. I wonder when this play was first written, and if this would have felt like a much more definite ending than that it does now.
They would have that aspect. It feels like a very sort of 90s Nora Ephron moment that was sort of put in there that might not even be in the play.
It is in a sense similar to Sleepless in Seattle, right? Because you don't get the happily ever after. You get the meeting. Everything that else is literally, everything else that happens is literally what happens later, right? We don't get that the next part. And like my head canon for Sleepless in Seattle is that they're going to be happy in some way, and my head canon for this is that they're going to reconnect because it is 2024, and you do have the internet, and knowing her name and knowing her city, it's not going to be really hard to figure it out.
And they clearly just didn't track each other down earlier because there was all this baggage, and they didn't want to reopen that box. Like,
he even says he saw her at an airport at some point, switching planes.
Which feels like it is also about, like, when are you trying to, and I'm sorry, I have to say the tagline now because I also think it's perfect. They missed their connection. It's just like, But like, it feels like it is like, it just wasn't the right time then for them to like make the connection with each other at that earlier moment where he saw her in an airport.
Which feels also very When Harry Met Sally, right? That's literally When Harry Met Sally. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, and again, obviously the whole movie, again, is also the Efron-esque of like someone is staring at you in personal growth. They're going through personal growth just by having this conversation and working through their past and like seeing where they ended up and what they would do different or not, or could still do different. I think the hopeful perspective is they can still do things different, or they can make up for things they didn't do in the past, even now. It is not set in stone. She can still see the child she gave up for adoption. It won't make up for the last 20 years, but it's not all is lost, right? There's always some kind of middle ground.
There is always what happens later, right? There's so many levels to the title, and I think one of them is what happens later after they parted ways and what they're catching up on. But the other thing is what happens after they meet now, and that really is... It is hopeful, right? The planes also kind of depart up, and it's like a sunrise. So it's not even that ambiguous, right? It is technically an ambiguous ending, but I don't think it's really that ambiguous.
No, it does. It also doesn't matter. It can go various ways, but it's probably positive, and I think that is sort of the thing.
It weirdly feels like their story could have also been one of the vignettes in When Harry Met Sally, right? Where they're like, and then we didn't meet for 34 years. 34 years. And then we met, and I almost wouldn't have gotten his phone number, but I tracked him down. And then they're just sitting there, like, holding hands. Because this is the cute thing about the bar scene where they start, like, holding hands and kind of, like, acting like a couple. And it's still before it's revealed that he is actually separated from his wife. So you're like, well, it's a little weird, but it doesn't go further than that. And then after that is revealed, they're actually strangely not as intimate anymore. Although they do actually like kind of start touching.
Definitely the perspective of like they want to get the hotel room to have sex.
Literally mentioned, right? She talks about, which is weird because
it spell it out.
Which feels like it is strange because it's not really set up in dialogue, and then it's just mentioned in dialogue. It's just kind of implied. It feels a little bit like, oh, I guess that's what we're doing. We're both on board for that. It doesn't feel like the transition quite works for that, but the fact that then it doesn't happen also kind of like makes that a little bit of a moot point. But that's definitely it's in the room.
Yeah, it's
already out there.
It's already out there. One other little bit of magical realism, or like sort of implying maybe there was that When Harry Met Sally soulmate story, is that they have the same name, which is not in the play. I looked it up. The character says something completely different in the play. Because it's Wilhelmina and William Davis.
W. Davis.
W. Davis. Which is really funny because the actor who plays the cigarette smoking.
I know. I was just thinking of that as well.
And
maybe it's like a shout out. Duchovny was like, you know what? Who was always a nice guy? W. Davis. But it's nice because they say it a lot. They call each other that, which again feels like one of those things like couples have like, cutesy names for each other, and the fact that they would have had the same name and would have like bonded over that, and then would have used that as kind of like instead of calling each other, honey, they were just like W. Davis, and you would get the same feeling from that.
And there's also the thing is like, oh, nobody else ever called me Wilhelmina because she goes with Willa, and it's like, but I liked it. Like, I like calling her that. And she's the only one where she let him call her that and stuff. And it is that kind of thing.
Which again connects, naming and words to intimacy, which is really all what this movie is.
So, yeah. About reviews, because they were almost all bad, and I do not understand what the fuck is going on there. Like, it had a 51 critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 28 in audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
What? I don't know what these people were expecting. Maybe they weren't expecting a long, talky movie. Maybe they wanted something with more action.
Like, I don't know. I think I read a decent Tumblr post where someone was like, why do you think it had such bad reviews? And it's sort of like trying to make sense of it because they also liked it. And we're like, yeah, maybe it is that sort of they expected more upbeat, less like sort of play type movie.
They might have expected a 90s rom-com.
Yeah, and it's like, no, it is what happens later after the 90s rom-com. There's that very meta moment where like the screen, because the screen's
the poster,
like it's a rom-com thing, and she unplugs it to plug in her
charge her phone, yeah.
And I don't know, I just I do not understand.
I honestly, yeah.
But also the critics, like, I mean, I have so many gripes with like what entertainment, like film criticism has gotten to. Sorry,
Ever since Roger Ebert died.
Yeah, I'm like, apparently. I'm sorry.
I think we've talked about this before, and the fact that critics, I mean, the barrier to entry to becoming a critic is so much lower today, just because everybody can get things, but that also means that there isn't as much money in it, right? The Chicago Sun-Times could pay Roger Ebert to be the movie critic, and he could make a good living and basically just watch movies and write about them, which means he saw a fuck ton of movies and was an expert in many, many genres. And so even if you have a take that this critic doesn't agree with, or vice versa, you're still going to accept that this is an expert who understands where this movie fits, what genre it is, like for whom it is supposed to be for, right? This is kind of like the problem with all reviews on the internet today is, you know, a new computer comes out and half the people will say, this is super great and this is what you need. And the other was like, that update really isn't worth it. And like the difference between that is like, if you're, you know, somebody who uses this for high end, I don't know, video editing or, you know, physics, particle physics, it's not for you. If you're the person who just walks into the store to need something to check email, it is for you. And you need to understand genre wise for whom this is and what it is. And I think that happens a lot because people don't understand for whom this is.
And so, I mean, obviously that the sad reality is like a lot of these top critics who sort of are still from the sort of not quite the Roger Ebert generation, but like sort of cut from that cloth of like actually being properly paid and thus also having seen a shit ton of things. It means a lot of them were white males, so they don't always necessarily judge certain things all that well. But like sort of actually confirming this theory is that on Rotten Tomatoes, one of the top critics is Mark Kermode. And Mark Kermode is like one of the like the modern day Roger Ebert who's still sticking around in the UK, who has also seen a shit ton of movies. And his review, it's like, it's just a one line, his full review is a video because this is where we are now, but it's incredibly contrived and it really shouldn't work. But it kind of does, which is kind of Roger Ebert's review of Pretty Woman, ironically. But it's like, yes, thank you. Like you saw, you knew what you were reviewing. And it's like you sort of went along for the ride.
And it's like, I honestly, like, this is one of the few, you know, new movies. I mean, we have been watching a few newerish movies for this podcast. This is the first one where I just went in and after like 10, 15 minutes, I was just like glued to the screen. I'm like, I love this movie. I don't know where it's going to go, but I really love this movie.
I was actually afraid of not liking it.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like super afraid of not liking it, or it's sort of mediocre. And I really, really liked it. I watched it like a week ago in my hotel room in London. That certainly added dimension, is looking at the water. So it was really nice. But like it is, I did genuinely liked it. I got sucked into it. It was great. And my gripe has been lately that like I've seen it. I still go to see a ton of movies. I try to see things in theaters. I like going to the movies. I also am spoiled because I live in Munich in walking distance of by now 4 or 5 cinemas who show English language movies. So I constantly can go see them. And I do. And like almost everything that I've seen in the last 2 to 3 years was mediocre as fuck. There's hardly anything that I wanted to sit down and see again, especially not theatrical releases. I saw better movies on streaming that I enjoyed more, like one of them being Red, White, Royal, Blue that I actually liked and wanted to see again. And then so many other mediocre things. I mean, I saw Challengers and The Fall Guy as a double feature. And Challengers is really good, but it's still not one that I will sit down and watch again, I think, very soon, unless I have like queer cinema. Whereas The Fall Guy is just the most mediocre film ever. It's not outrageously bad, but I also wouldn't call it good. And that's been too many movies. It's been too many of those. And this one was actually good. So I don't know what the fuck they were on about here. Like, there's so many really bad ratings. And there's, like, I'm scrolling through Rotten Tomatoes right now. It's like a ton of like 2 out of 5 stars, 3 out of 5 stars.
I mean, I can understand you not giving it the whole 5 if that's not your cup of tea.
But like, it is, I don't see this as anything is below a 4. Like, it is, there's things like here, what happens later should have been called What Happens When Co-Stars with No Chemistry.
What? What did these people watch?
What did you watch? Together try and fail to make a cute romantic comedy. And the dialogue is awful. Or people saying it feels like a night at the airport. It's uncomfortable, boring, long, dark with nothing to do. It's like, no. Like, what did you mean? What did you want? Explosion?
I really want to know what these people think about other movies that are in that vein, what they think of Before Sunrise, what they think of movies in which people just talk, because I am, again, I keep repeating this, like, I love visually interesting movies. I love good cinematography. There's some movies, and we're going to have to talk about Rye Lane, which is another one of the very recent comedies, which has great cinematography. I mean, it has very non-standard, shall we say, cinematography, the way that it's shot with wide lenses and the way that it looks, but really great cinematography that's striking. But most of them don't, and I don't really care that much. It's really about what do you want to watch, and what I want to watch is a competently produced movie in which great actors get great lines and have actual chemistry. And sure, chemistry is for you to judge, but I wouldn't say that these two don't have chemistry. Like, it's not maybe Julia Roberts and Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, but it's also not there. Yeah,
and also cinematography wise, again, for the fact that they're in an airport, it looks really good. And they have a very little budget. This is an indie movie, like Bleecker Street Productions, and which also strikes me because it tells you a lot about the state of the industry if Meg Ryan can only barely get a shoestring budget with Bleecker Street together, but can still cast David Duchovny because he's been there long enough that he's like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm not an idiot. She's Meg Ryan. But it's like, no big studio wants to make this movie. Nancy Meyers can get her rom-com made with Netflix because they keep scraping her, and like, because Netflix has gone, down the drain. But it's like, but yeah, there's a person who is a Substack who's written a good review of this, apparently, because she gets it. She's like, the Maria Gates from Cool People Have Feelings 2 Substack. There's a little bit of classics. There's a little bit of classic screwball Nora Ephron style patter, undeniable star chemistry, and some of the magical and fantastical aspects of films like Prelude to a Kiss and Job versus the Volcano, which are some of my favorite Meg Ryan films. And also, I would say like Sleepless in Seattle. Obviously.
Sleepless in Seattle, I think, is the closest. Like I've said that the dialogue is very much Aaron Harris, but Sleepless in Seattle is the vibe.
Like airports play a big role. Always in rom-com, so I think it is also actually, it makes so much sense to set this on an airport, not only because it's this limbo in between space that they're both in this moment in their lives, clearly, is that whole, are you on a trip or are you on a journey? I think he says he's on a trip, but I think it turns out he's also on a journey. She definitely is. But also it's always like, meeting people at the gate. Like, I mean, there's a whole discussion in When Harry Met Sally about like when you pick up picking people up at the airport is a crucial moment in a relationship. It's early on in the relationship, and
that's why
they meet at an airport at some point, right? There's one of the key meetings of Harry and Sally is in the airport. And then also obviously Sleepless in Seattle is like flying, and they have their first actual locking eyes moment with her coming off the plane before they even talk. So it's like always planes and like chasing after each other on flights and trying to get to the gate. And
I remember and this was in the early 2000s when I did this internship at the screenplay company, which was going to be my first career. And I was every now and then like writing things, and like one of the people who was running the show would read them and give me feedback on them. And one of the times that I turned something in, her feedback was like, why are you always writing scenes at airports? And I'm like, because that's what that is. That's the genre. That's what I was trying to achieve. And like, this is the thing that there is not to go all, like, I know how much you love the concept of heterotopia, but there is something about these like liminal spaces and the way that they're connecting us.
The
but
thing about but it applies to airports. It just does not apply to Disneyland for various variety of reasons. That was my own.
Let it be known. Let it be known.
Liminal space is great for stuff like this.
Yeah, because it's always right. You make connections. You go from place to place. It literally connects you, but also disconnects you, because it's not a place that anyone is actually meant to be. It's like a highway, right? The highway is not there for you to enjoy the highway. It's for you to get from A to B. And I really enjoy, I guess, transportation-based romantic comedies. It's getting very genre-specific.
Means being on the spectrum, but it's like, you know. But yeah, it is a thing. There's a reason why Before Sunrise they're on the train, then decide to get off the train together, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of thing. We should also do Love at First Sight, that Netflix film. There's like
really loved it. I actually wondered about this when I watched it, whether we could do it, because it didn't feel to me like it was enough of a comedy, but it's also such a good movie.
It's a really good movie, and you meet at the airport, and then they sit on the plane together.
Yeah. Which, again, really funny thing, it's one of those movies where there's another movie that's very similar, which is Upgraded with what's her name?
I started watching that and couldn't get into it. I need to give it
the issue that I had with that one is that it didn't feel like the fact that she was upgraded was really, like, that wasn't really enough of a plot point. So like, it's a completely different movie. And I think Love at First Sight, or what was it, the book was The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight, which I think actually would have been a better title than Love at First Sight, because it would have made me click much earlier. But it's a really good movie, and it has the same kind of energy, which I think there is that thing about being, you know, like just the psychology of people being together in space, in small spaces, and having time to talk. And again, the thing that we keep coming back to in this podcast is that you need a passage of time in order for it to become believable that there's a connection. And this, again, is what this does, right? It kind of like compresses the passage of time because you're in the same space and you do nothing but talk.
And we sort of floated that idea before, and we might have to do it for like the next summer season of this podcast, is doing TV shows, because one day on also Netflix, I mean,
that's a movie. Like, that is a movie originally.
There's a mini series. Yeah,
I know that there's a mini series. I haven't watched it yet because I watched the movie and I know how it ends. But
the movie is so bad. But like,
it has Anne Hathaway.
But it's still really, fucking bad. Like,
I didn't think it was that bad, because it has Anne Hathaway.
So I read the book one day, but anyway, like, it is a really good book. It is a very bad film, but it's a really good miniseries, because the miniseries actually.
I don't think the movie is that bad. I'm gonna. It's not a great movie, but it's horrible.
But the miniseries is better because it can give breathing.
It has time.
This idea of time, of jumping through time, and this whole plot is based on jumping through time, but also. I feel like they don't have like the airport meeting. They meet at the like last day of their graduation, but it is a weird liminal. There's also the liminal space. It is the last day.
It's over, and the next thing is
university, which is a big trope for teen film as well. But this takes in a different direction.
Prom night is not without reason always kind of
prom night, and the summer right after is often a big thing. Like Mystic Pizza takes place in the summer right after. Sort of that kind of that liminality, and that works for young people, obviously. So I think it is sort of like the older you get, is the liminal space of like just coming out of a relationship, just like being in a weird, on the precipice of something, which this film also does. It's like she's about to meet her grown-up daughter. He's just apparently breaking up with his wife, and it's a new chapter, and what that will mean for
to the point where he's not admitting that to her. Right.
Yeah. It's like if you don't fall in. She's also not admitting that this is what she's doing. She pretends she's seeing this old friend of hers, and
I mean, it's the onion layers that get peeled back as they talk, which is
and like
is
her trying to be. Oh, I'm glad you never sold out, and then it turns out no, she's that data pulling whatever. But yeah. No, this is great. I don't understand the reviews. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with
it. We've been talking for a very long time about how we're complaining that the reviews are bad. Humans out there, if you listen to this and if you trust us even just a little bit with our taste in movies, go watch this movie. It is really great. It is
Also, I
really
think-
comfortable to watch. It has conflict without being to the point where you're like on edge, which is something that I also enjoy about romantic comedies, right? Where you're not like, oh no, where is this gonna go? Like you can actually watch this and be completely relaxed and still be entertained, and it's still something that's engaging. Yeah, it's a really good movie.
And what really did move me, like, was the dedication to For Nora. And actually, is a really good story behind it, because by the Directors Guild of America's rules, the very first title card that has to appear as soon as the credits roll is directed by. That is a union rule for the Directors Guild of America. So if you want anything else, even a dedication, you need to, like, you technically can't do that. So Meg Ryan had to, like, send a request to the Directors Guild of America that she can put the dedication to Nora Ephron as the very first thing when the credits roll. And whoever decided that in the board of the Directors Guild voted anonymously that they want this, and obviously, like, because everyone loved Nora Ephron this much, so she had to, like, actually make a request that For Nora is the first thing to appear, which also makes sense. Like, you see that last shot of sort of like Ben, a bit of a magical realism where the clouds of departing planes form a little.
The CGI shot,
yeah,
which is cute. It's very cute.
It is very cute.
And I think that's the movie, right? It's it's a good movie. People talk a lot. If you enjoy movies of very attractive, good actors talking a lot.
As I said, I think the actual tagline that does exist is very on point. It's they missed their connection. And now they found it again.
What's your fake tagline?
Sleepless in Arkansas.
Mine is rain sticks are romantic.
Okay.
It's a bad tagline. It's not actually a tagline. It's just a comment.
Sleepless in Arkansas.
Sleepless in Arkansas is pretty on point, and it's clearly a romantic comedy. It is funny. I mean, it's based on a play that I think also is comedic but with depth. I haven't seen the play. I would love to see the play.
I would love to do the play, actually, but like, probably can't convince the English drama group to do it
we should just do it. We should just do a production of us doing the play.
Yeah, we should do that.
Since I am apparently David Duchovny, minus the great hair. Can we talk about the hair? Like, the hair is great. David Duchovny's wild hair is just wonderful.
Yeah, sort of his look by now. And hers, I think, so like Meg Ryan's hair by now is actually shorter, so I'm not sure if it was still long when they shot this or if
she wore a wig,
But like, it's very intentionally styled to be like sort of Sally hair, I think. Or sort of like Meg Ryan 90s hair.
It's charming. It's utterly charming. And we don't have, there's criticism to be raised about this as about any product of culture. We don't really care about that too much right now. We like this movie.
But yeah.
And that is, did we miss anything?
I think so. I don't.
We did Wild Tangent again. We clearly did Wild Tangent.
We did Wild Tangent.
We vaguely gestured to the plot line, which is also not that much of a plot.
No, I mean, it is really just like sort of their relationship.
Yeah,
anyway.
And it's I would give this all of the wagon wheel coffee tables, which I think was originally our rating.
We didn't. I think
we haven't done this for a while, but I feel like this one deserves.
I rate things. No, we did it for the first 2 episodes of the season. I forgot for Pretty Woman, but like, what do I rate this? Yeah, I do rate it.
I would rate this a 5, just because this is my personal rating, and I get to, and it has all the elements that I want.
I just want to find it more creative. It's like 5 out of 5 airport vouchers or something.
Hotel vouchers.
Hotel vouchers.
Small bottles of Jägermeister stolen from the airport bar, or what was it, vodka or something.
5 out of 5 complimentary shuttles.
No. You know what it is? 5 out of 5 rain sticks.
Yeah, definitely is. Anyway, that is what happens later.